are these people?
This is kind of a part 2 from the Muriel Bowser segment that I did last week. By the way, if you want to learn more about that, actually, that might be a good basis to watch this. You can go to our playlist and check that out. I think it's called Mayor 1%, if I remember correctly. But I mentioned briefly in that segment about Initiative 82, sorry. Initiative 82 was voted on twice by DC voters to essentially increase the minimum wage of service workers so that eventually they'll get an actual minimum wage to, in our case, $17 an hour. Right now it's at 10, and it was scheduled to go up to 12 next month. However, Mayor Palliser thought it would be a good idea to overstep the will of the workers, voters rather, and workers by appealing it. So basically, the powers that be are looking to not give people their money. So obviously, this has caused somewhat of a conundrum in DC right now, especially among the the service worker sector. There obviously it's the issue regarding paying workers, especially in that industry, is very mixed, as you can imagine. So but I wanted to give you guys, we try to be nuanced here. We'll try and give both sides. And then obviously I'm going to give my take, and I'm sure you guys will appreciate, I'm sure, be able to make your takes in the chat. So let's get into it. So let's start with, I believe this is this Fox? Yeah, I believe this is a Fox News segment. So local Fox, not the big Fox,
right?
Where they go into a little bit more information regarding this appeal of Initiative 82. So let's check it out.
DC Council voting today to pause Initiative 82.
And that's the gradual elimination of the tipped minimum wage. It comes as Mayor Bowser pushes to repeal the act altogether.
Yeah, DC News Now's Marielle Carbone is live at the Wilson Building. And Marielle, this has been a very heated issue since it first went on the ballot in 2022.
Yeah, Tosin, and Mark, it has been, and today really no different. Now, this vote, it simply pauses the next wage increase from going into effect, which was set to happen July 1st. But workers we spoke to here today, they fear this will lead to the eventual repeal of I-82. In a heated moment outside council chambers, tipped workers demanding council members honor Initiative 82.
Initiative 82 has absolutely increased my pay.
Rochelle Young is a bartender at Aslan on 14th Street.
My employer is not willing to pay me more than what is the minimum, and so the raises provided by Initiative 82 are essential.
So she doesn't want to see I-82 paused.
A pause on Initiative 82 is basically akin to taking a step towards a repeal.
But that's what happened.
Mr. Chairman, there are 8 yeses and 4 noes.
Tuesday, council members voted to pause the next wage bump laid out under Initiative 82. The voter passed measure that phases out the tipped minimum wage.
Pausing the July 1st wage increase allows the council to fully consider the data and the impact.
Still, some council members are weary. Brianne Nadeau voted against the pause.
People make plans when they're told they're getting a raise.
The pause comes as Mayor Muriel Bowser pushes a full repeal of I-82 in an effort to make it easier to do business in D.C. Restaurant owners claim I-82 has made it more expensive to operate, leading to closures.
20+ restaurants have announced that they're going to close this year.
Rebecca Paxton, research director for the Employment Policies Institute, says the data shows I-82 is hurting wages.
Certainly the law boosted the cash wage that workers are getting paid by employers, but unfortunately it's had an adverse effect on tips.
Now, as for that full repeal of I-82, that is under the mayor's 2026 budget proposal, and people on both sides of this issue plan to testify tomorrow at a public hearing on the budget, so we'll keep you updated on where that full repeal stands as it moves forward. Reporting live from the Wilson Building, I'm Marielle Carbone, DC News Now.
Right. So obviously people are upset, and rightly so, because as it was reported, right now the minimum wage for service workers is at 10. It's supposed to go up to 12 next month, but obviously with the repeal, well, there's right now the council is saying that they want to put it on pause until October to put to a vote. But obviously, as one of the councilmen said, people were banking on getting that raise next month. So if they do repeal it, what happens to the workers as far as this promised pay? You know, or if they do decide to go ahead with it, do they get retroactive pay? These are questions those are questions I asked immediately. So, but obviously this is a big old mess. And you're hearing a lot of people, or a few people were saying, oh, we have to look at the data. We have to look at the data to see if this is worth pursuing or not. I have some thoughts about that too. But initially, do you have any thoughts? Didn't you used to work in service briefly
Yeah,
at one
couple
point?
of places.
So what do you think about this from that angle? You
I mean,
know,
it's
in
the
terms
classic,
of,
like,
well,
the rest of the world doesn't do tips, first of all. They actually just pay their workers real wages, you know? Like,
right.
so this whole thing of like, then they always bring this up whenever the minimum wage is brought up. This whole thing about the, well, the tips, and this is going to hurt the tip workers. And it's like, okay, I don't care. Pay me real money. Tips suck, you know? Like, I mean, I know they've talked about like tips being like male workers don't receive tips nearly as much, you know? Like, there's a whole bunch of like gender and race stuff brought into like tipping culture, you know?
Right, which we talked
So,
about last week, according
yeah,
to John Jeter's article, regarding Muriel Bowser, but he mentioned some aspects of I-82. He mentioned that there is a lot of sexism and racism in regards to, as you said, tipping culture. Like,
yeah,
typically, it was reported that white men generally would get more tips versus women and people of color. And then, but then even that, the idea of like people relying on tips, that's assuming people will tip what they're supposed to. Like,
right.
we've seen like even online assholes who may have like a free $100 meal somewhere and they might tip like $2.
Yeah.
So we've seen bullshit like that before. So they make it so it's just kind of not surprising, but it's the idea of like, well, we can't afford to give people more money because it would affect people tipping, but you're making the assumption that people will tip appropriately, which many people do not if they
No.
choose to tip at all.
Right.
So, so, yeah. So I think it's kind of asinine to make that assumption. But we'll get into more of that, the fuck shit. So we'll get into more of the fuck shit in
He's
a
a service
second.
worker.
But what?
Squidward service, bro. You gotta respect Squidward. You know,
Oh, true.
more and more relatable Squidward as you get older. You know.
Right.
Anyway,
So let's get more into it with some of these council members. Oh,
there you go.
of what they had to say. So, as it was reported that 8 out of the 12 voted to pause it,
Of course.
and one of them is here, Robert White. So I pulled this from Twitter. So Unite Here Local 25 tweeted out Robert White, and he's the at-large DC councilman, seen pledging to honor Initiative 82. Today, he will cast the deciding vote to stall I-82, robbing workers of a mandated wage increase and voting against the will of 75% of DC voters. Shame. So he was one of the ones. So he was one of the ones who ended up voting for the pause. And when
Shame.
And when he got called out on it, And the thing is, a lot of people like him, and he actually tried to run for mayor. But as I tell people, do not trust any of these bitches, even if you like them.
Politician
Because
opens their mouth, they're fucking lying to you.
Right. Right. So he tweeted, I guess after he made the vote, I make decisions based on what I believe is right for the people most affected, even when it's hard. I know some may disagree, and I respect that, but I won't trade conviction for votes. So let's see what he has to say when, I guess, he was called out in terms of his vote. So you can play the clip in the tweet.
And a lot of folks will say, well, if you don't stand with us on this, then never have our support again. I want folks to support. I really do. I gotta stand up for.
Yeah, of course you fucking do. You want people to support everything you do.
To represent. And so the thing that's never going to persuade me is the politics. The thing that will persuade me is people and the data behind it. And here's what I'm finding is that, and it's
You know what? Can you turn it up and maybe start again? I think it's low for me.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Yeah, hold on. Let me do this real quick.
I think for everyone else it might be fine, but I didn't see anything. But
yeah, let me make sure you get some gain as well. How about that? Everyone gets gain. Everybody gets gain. Cool.
And a lot of folks will say, well, if you don't stand with us on this, then never have our support again. I want folks to support. I really do. I gotta stand up for average people like my family, who are the ones that I really ran to represent. And so the thing that's never going to persuade me is the politics. The thing that will persuade me is people and the data behind it. And here's what I'm finding is that, and it's inconclusive, right? The vast majority of people that I speak to who are not affiliated with either side, who work in this industry, the majority of people who I'm able to reach, who are not affiliated with either side, have said to me that they have lost income since I-82 went into effect.
Name them.
The majority of restaurants that I'm seeing close are the full
Which ones?
service. And we are seeing the federal government, Congress is about to pass a bill that's going to impact wage workers. So if I'm concerned, and I am, that we're losing jobs and that a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of folks in the industry are losing wages, then I'm nervous and I've got to figure out what do we do to make sure that we have the highest take-home pay for people and we have the largest percentage, the largest possible number of smaller independently owned restaurants. Now, none of us can say honestly that we have 100% the right answer here, because we don't have enough information.
I bet a couple people could.
Tells me I need to be concerned and figure out what is in the best interest of the people in the city who are working. So I respect that we have a difference of opinion here. I respect that you believe fully that your view on this is right. I believe that my view on this is right. That I'm starting to see everyday people lose wages because of this. And I've got to figure out, what do I do? Not figure out who do I like the most, who do I want to side with. If I had to decide that, I'd be with you. But I've got to make sure that my decision is based on the people.
What?
So I've got to get upstairs, but I want to make sure that I hear you. I've talked to folks on every side of this issue as much as possible to understand as much as I can. We've got a lot to learn as we pause and sort of gather what is best for the city. But we're not going to agree on every issue, but there are going to be most issues we're going to stand together on. And I think today is one that we're not. And I recognize that you don't love that. I wish we were on the same side too.
You were running it.
Okay. So he mentioned. So I should have put this up, but this is what he did in order to collect data to hear from the people. Now, he might have done more, but this is what he did on Twitter. He posted a Google form and asked people, if you work in the industry, I want to hear from you. Now, just looking at his Twitter in response to a lot of this, I think a lot of them were bots who were saying, oh, I worked at this restaurant and I was not making much wages, so I didn't agree with I-82. It looked more bots to me. And he was responding to them as if they were actual people. Now, they could be, but I found it kind of interesting that he decided to do a Google form with no verification if they worked at a restaurant, if they ever did, if they ever were affected. So So just given the optics of what I saw on Twitter, I thought that was kind of shitty,
Yeah.
and not the best way to kind of gather the data that you needed to determine if repealing I-82 or putting it on pause rather would be the right thing. But he kept saying, "Oh, people are losing money," and I called this out on Twitter. Now, well, here's the thing: could it be that workers are losing money is because the owners do not want to pay
That's who he's talking to.
their workers because they know that they have to increase their base salary and they don't want to. So they're like, okay, well, I don't want to increase it, so I'm just going to cut your hours. That I think is more plausible than using the initiative as a reason and restaurants closing as a reason for putting this thing on pause. And then the other thing is, more importantly, look at this economy. Like, no one is going out to eat in this. Like, look, I have the money. I don't remember the last time that I've gone. Like, really, the only time when I sit down and eat at a restaurant now is when I'm traveling. Like, when I'm home, I don't really go out to eat. And even when I do, it's like Chipotle or something like that. And even that's getting expensive. Like, I remember back in the day, like almost 20 years ago, you can get like a burrito bowl and like a soda for like under $10. And now it's more closer to 20 and you get less food. So people are not going out to eat people are not going out to eat in the same way anymore. And it's funny because I hear, or at least I've heard that DC, because it's more or less federal workers here, is recession proof. But I think even now with COVID and the fact that things have gotten way more expensive, even here, I would argue that it's forced people, even people who make money, to kind of scale back a little bit. Or I hear, at least in my circles, people complaining more about how expensive things are gone. So yeah, I don't really necessarily buy the idea of workers are complaining that they're getting paid less without saying that they're probably getting paid less because the owners are not giving them what is owed to them and are cutting their hours as a result because they need to meet their bottom line. That's what I believe.
Yeah.
And there were other people who thought the same thing, or at least in a similar way as I did. At Paxton_Sonia said, overturning the will of the people for a second time is crazy. How are you any better than congressional Republicans if you disregard DC's right to vote and choose? I voted for you for mayor because I believed you had the backbone she doesn't. I guess we'll see today. And he did not prove that. So, at Singing Chef 85 tweeted, this is all to response to Robert White. You need to find out who's been paid off by lobbies because I've testified for one fair wage and called them out entirely. The lobbies are why we have service fees that allow the owners to steal what guests considers a tip. The confusion was intentional. Look up articles about it. They're absolutely disgusting how they talk about tip staff and they just want to keep us enslaved. So Robert actually responded to this and he asked, can you share more about what real respect and fairness would look like for you in this industry? I want to make sure the path forward reflects that. And then Tara responded, 1, open transparency about any service fees. It is not a tip and goes to owners. Also, owners need to be transparent about tip pools. I've had 30K stolen when working Philo Timo DC. I guess that's a restaurant. I didn't check. And luckily, I kept my printouts of my tips to show the state attorney. This is why 82 is so important. So yeah, so the idea of she saying that, like, how at certain places, just regular places now, they might just ask you for a tip just because, like, she's saying that a lot of that money, if they do tip, is not going to the workers, it's going to the owners. So that should be something that they should be looked at as well, which I haven't necessarily heard about. this is because I kind of between bound. I'm not to dox myself, but I'm in between bound wards, so I essentially have 2 congressmen who represent me. But this is the one that I like better. So this is from Janice Lewis George, who tweeted yesterday. Today, the council is voting on the plan to pause Initiative 82, which helps ensure tip workers can earn a living wage. Swipe right to learn why suspending I-82 would harm workers and undermine the will of district voters. So she goes into it. Today, the council is voting on a plan to suspend Initiative 82. The restaurant industry is skewing the facts to delay businesses paying workers a living wage. Here's what you need to know. The restaurant industry has been growing since I-82 was enacted. Since 2022, DC has seen over 100 full-service restaurants open, and growth has steadily continued over the last few years. Now, granted, I do know that there have been restaurants that have closed, especially within the last couple of months. There's a restaurant within a walking like a couple of blocks from me that just closed down 2 months ago. But she's saying even in the midst of restaurants closing, there have been others that have been opening up, probably in their place, which I have seen. So you can make the argument either or, but it's not like I haven't seen restaurants pop off, just go down entirely. Like I've seen other restaurants coming in too. Anyway, in 2024, DC saw its highest number of new restaurants open in over a decade. Wages and employment are both growing. Since I-82 was implemented, tip workers have seen their wages double. DC Food Services employment has grown by 4% since May 2023, outpacing both Virginia and Maryland. And last slide she did, pausing Initiative 82 would harm workers. Restaurants are experiencing real challenges, including rising prices and families tightening their wallets. The council needs to work on making our economy work for everyone while honoring our commitment to workers and the overwhelming will of workers. And she tweeted this after the vote. Today's vote was not the outcome we wanted, but our goal remains the same. Tomorrow, we organize, keep raising our voices, and keep pushing for real solutions that support our restaurants without compromising workers' right to dignity and a living wage. So I felt she was decent. I felt she tried to give a little bit, again, more nuance to it, but it does sound like she's actually like looking at it from the worker side and is actually supporting them in this case. So I did appreciate Janice for at least sharing this online. So I said I'll show you both sides. So we're going to look at essentially the restaurant lobby right now and see what they have to say in regards to the repeal or the pause of I-82. So this is Fox 5. So we're going to hear what this idiot has to say, and then we'll continue.
Joining us now is President and CEO of the Restaurant Association of Metropolitan Washington, Sean Townsend, who's been, of course, following this very closely. And I know, Sean, your group has said that by the end of the year, if things were to continue, about 40% of D.C. restaurants would shutter their doors. What do you make of this latest breaking news out of the D.C. Council today?
Councilmember McDuffie, we supported the measure that he introduced last week to pause the $2 increase that was slated for July 1st. And what you heard today was overwhelmingly the members agreed that it is now a time to pause and take a look at to assess the impact of Initiative 82 and figure out where we go from here. The mayor has inserted a proposal to repeal Initiative 82 in her growth agenda, and also there's a federal measure that will soon be implemented once it's passed in the House to not tax tips. And so we need to understand the implications of Initiative 82 with all of the closures happening and workers now saying that they're receiving less take-home pay, but also this no tax on tips. What does that mean for our local economy, for our local food service industry?
Pause there for a second.
Very difficult because, as you point out,
so he mentioned that there is a bill currently right now that tip workers will not get taxed on their tips. I talked about last week, and I'm going to bring up that section again after this, but keep that in the back of your head because that's kind of misleading of what he said there. But go ahead.
Now, you're talking about a livable wage in a part of the country that is excruciatingly, painfully expensive, prohibitive for some. That would rise that minimum wage and make it, quote, livable, right? To go back to the tip wages would be to go back to the old way. It would repeal, to your point, a referendum that was put on the ballot by the people of D.C., voted by the people of D.C. And when we here at Fox 5 have put up our Insta polls, we've asked the people, do you want to see it go back? We still get this 50-50 split where people don't feel as though it should be repealed, as the mayor has suggested. It is hard because I hear what you're saying. Small businesses are absolutely suffering as well, but you're going against what the voters voted for. And that in lies the issue for the D.C. Council. They'd have to go against their own electorate here. So is there a compromise anywhere?
We're open to having these conversations. One thing I will point out is that DC has one of the highest, if not the highest, minimum wage in the country. And so I hear the term often roll back or go back to $5 and change. To be clear, no one in the industry makes $5 and change, or ever did. If the server or the tip worker makes that amount an hour, it is the responsibility of the employer to make that worker whole up to the minimum wage, whatever that is. So no one's actually making $5 an hour. However, where we are now at $10 an hour, no one's making $10 an hour. They're still making the minimum wage because the tip credit system has not been completely eliminated. And so the employer still has a responsibility to make that employee whole. What we're simply asking the council to do is take a look at these incremental increases and how they are impacting the restaurants. We want to make sure that workers are getting a fair and decent living wage, but we also want to make sure that the restaurant is still able to survive in order to pay workers that minimum wage. What we're also seeing is that workers aren't getting the tips that they used to under this new system of the incremental increases. And so I think it's a good time to just stop, pause, and take a look at things, and also understand the implications of federal legislation coming down the pipeline.
Should Initiative 82 have been, I don't think the word is rolled out, but at least better explained as it was put on the ballot? Because it seems as though so many people misunderstood what it meant, because there has been that rollback from some people who voted saying, wait a second, maybe I didn't understand this fully. And who was that onus on? Who should have better explained it? Was it the government? Was it the mayor, the council? Should it come from your association?
We'll continue to release data from a poll that we just did a couple weeks ago, and an overwhelmingly majority of DC voters who are likely to vote in 2026 said that if they knew what they knew now about Initiative 82, they would not have voted yes in favor of Initiative 82. And they also believe that it has been misunderstood this entire time since it's been rolled out. And so I think the goalpost has moved in terms of the 70% that voted for in favor of Initiative 82. I think there's an opportunity there to provide additional education, as you mentioned, so that people really understand what's happening right now to the industry and why workers are saying that they're receiving less take-home pay.
Well, Sean, we thank you for coming on the DMV Zone. I know this conversation will continue. Clearly, the council making their first vote here on at least holding back the increase of that minimum wage. And coming up, we're going to talk to some Axios reporters here who are reporting that sales, restaurant sales, and people going out to eat is coming down in the Washington, D.C. area, much to what you all have been saying as well. So, Sean, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
I have a couple of thoughts regarding what he said. He said that they have data that proves that overwhelmingly, if people understood the implications of I-82, that they would have voted no. Where is it?
Yeah.
Where is it? Number two, who did you ask? Because I think it's very important that we need to kind of see it, and that's the thing. It's like everyone, all these people are saying, "Oh, we have data. Oh, we have data." We want to see it, please. And we want to verify. And again, and this is what people need to understand, especially with these lobbyist groups. They will come up with anything to side things their way. So it may not even be done independently or by third party. A lot of these lobbies are connected to a lot of these data groups that would essentially cook up this data for them to side things in their favor. And it may not necessarily be from the perspective of the people who it affects. So that's one thing that they're saying, that people, and I'm just saying this generally because, having kind of worked in or advocated in these circles, I know like kind of the tricks that they do is that sometimes when they ask for data, they're not asking actual people who are most affected.
Yeah, they're asking focus groups, so they're fucking, manipulating it one way or another.
Right.
So,
or just even in the way how they word questions. I think essentially, it's meant in a lot of ways to cause confusion because, we've seen this all the time, just even in the regular elections, that there may be people on the right who might think that, oh, Medicare for all might be like communism or whatever else, or socialism or whatever else. But if you ask them, like, would you support something as far as like, if you need to go to the doctor, and would you support the idea of having that be no cost to you as part of a universal healthcare package, then even people on the right would say yes. So I think it's a question of how things are worded for like the regular schmegular citizens that will actually understand the implications of what they're voting for, that they can make a more informed decision, which to a point, I kind of agree with what that guy was saying. But again, a lot of this stuff, again, I have to question where this data is coming from, because as you said, it's coming from a lot of focus groups that are meant to skew the information to work things in their favor, to make it more favorable to the corporations. So that's kind of where my concern is in regards to this data. But more importantly, and I probably will say this at the end, you're setting a bad precedent here, like everyone involved. You're basically saying to people, to voters who voted for this twice, fuck your decision, we have the right to appeal it. Does that sound like a democracy to you? And again, and I felt this story was important because people complain, oh, Republicans do this bullshit. These are all Democrats who are doing this. And these are Democrats that are doing this on the local level. So, so if you're not speaking up regards to how fuck shit Democrats are, you should be.
Yep.
Which is why I say to people, you need to watch what's going on the local level, because you may not even know you're being screwed. And if this is happening to me in terms of in DC, this can happen anywhere. So that's the other thing why I say is like, when you vote for things and they pass, you don't just pat yourself on the back and call yourself a job well done and close the door and go home. You have to monitor and make sure that they don't overturn shit like they're trying to do right now. So it's a constant. So as Kwame Ture says, organizing is eternal. This is why it's eternal, because the powers that be are don't want you to have this stuff, and they have the money and the means to try and overturn things in a matter of you trying to bring them in. So it's a constant battle to ensure that, no, you're going to keep this in, and we're going to have our foot on your neck to make sure that it stays in place, if not make it better. So, so I felt that was important to kind of mention in terms of this. So I want to go back to what this guy was saying, in terms of Trump is planning to eliminate tax on tips. Very misleading, and I reported on this last week. This was pulled from the article that I read from Black Agenda Report. Donald Trump campaigning on eliminating taxes on tips, and while Jaharaman said the gesture is mostly symbolic, so again, he's kind of giving a wink, wink, nudge, nudge to tip workers. Only about a third of restaurant workers earn enough to pay taxes on their tips. So, so they continue, it's pandering, but Donald Trump is going to deliver a little bit of money for tip workers, while Muriel Bowser is talking about rolling back their wages. Right. So, so that's the kind of the point which that guy missed. Like, yeah, you repeal it, you're going to revert back to whatever level you're trying to revert it back to. Who knows now? But the money that they're making, depending on what it is not enough tipped anyway. So essentially, it's a nothing burger. Essentially, it just cancels each other out. Essentially, you make less money, but you won't get taxed on the tips. So it's like, it makes no sense, at least to me. So I pulled this from Fox as well. So what they're saying, Amanda Michelle Gomez with United Here Local 25, she actually follows me on Twitter, by the way, which represents about 7,000 hospitality workers in the region, said they were deeply disappointed in the council members who voted to pause. United Here Local 25 supports those small businesses that need some help. We can do that through a tax credit, through rent relief, but we shouldn't do it by undermining workers who are counting on these wage increases, Gomez said. There were chants of don't cut our wages as the vote was underway. At one point, people were even removed from the chambers. So this was in the council building. One woman named Nikki, who said she has been a tip worker for the past decade, became emotional as the vote concluded. This is a pattern of not just a member, but mayor, but DC Council prioritizing the interests of business workers, owners over workers, and that needs to end, she added. So, so I think this is kind of appropriate, and especially right now we're in Pride Month. This was at station_ZZZ. Reminded that Mayor Bowser told GLAAD DC in her 2022 questionnaire that she would respect the results of Initiative I-82. Now she's proposing to repeal it in her budget. It is insane we are allowing elected officials to lie so flagrantly like this. Actually, if you can zoom in, so I can read what she said 3 years ago. So she was asked, do you support repealing the sub-minimum wage for tip workers? I will support, this is her words, I will support Initiative 82 if passed by district voters. In 2016, as part of my commitment to create pathways to the middle class for Washingtonians across all 8 wards, I signed the Fair Shot Minimum Wage Amendment Act of 2016 into law to raise the district's minimum wage to $15 per hour by 2020, which she did. The wage now stands at $15.50, which is the amount that tip workers are entitled to if they do not earn that amount through the sub-minimum wage plus tips. Still, there is a pitched debate about whether the tip minimum wage works for all tip workers, and to be sure, there is a case to be made on either side. So while I would prefer an approach to changing the tip wage that is thoughtful and carefully considered through the legislative process, if Initiative 82 passes, I will support its implementation.
If. But
Right.
not
Which
before
it did
it
pass.
does. Yeah.
Right. But it did pass twice. And she's looking to repeal it now because she's in bed with the donors and the owners of the restaurant industry and not caring for the workers. So yeah. So cautionary tale for you all. To be mindful of your local politicians because they do the same fuck shit as our federal one. And they have more impact on your life than probably your federal politicians do. So I thought it was important to kind of share that as a way for you guys to be aware of, even in your city or town, that this is the potential that can happen if you do not keep your politicians accountable. So we'll follow the story because I think it's very interesting to kind of see how this will go down. I think they'll have to vote in the fall to see if it will be repealed, because right now it is on pause. But as I said earlier, that people were expecting a raise. So now they have to wait, if not get it. So what's going to happen to them? What are they going to do? Especially now in this economy where things are getting more expensive, their pay is on pause. So, and as I said, people will go out to eat and don't tip, or don't tip well enough to warrant them going out to eat. So so I'll just say that, like, if you're going out and you can't tip your workers appropriately, look, and I'm not saying I'm sure, because I worked in the service industry for a minute too, like, you're gonna get bad service, maybe. I honestly, for me, I've never had service so bad that I felt like no one deserved a tip.
Yeah.
Like, general rule of thumb, at minimum 15%, even if the service is bad. And then 20% just normal, right? And then if they go above and beyond, oh, thank
Speaking
you,
of
Sean.
tips.
Speaking of tips,
Appreciate it, dog.
Great topic. But yeah, but here's the thing: if you're going out to eat, you're not just paying for the food; you're paying for the service. And again, like this is a way, we talk about taking care of your friends, taking care of your family, taking care of your neighbors. This is a way to do that. These workers may not get the money they need in order to make it. So by you tipping them and tipping them appropriately, you are supporting them in terms of paying their bills. If you can't afford to do that, then I have to question whether you should go out to eat, cook food at home. I'm sorry to say that, but I think people need to know that because I feel there's a lot of privileged people who kind of use eating out. Oh, wow. So thank you, Margaret. So did you guys
Appreciate it, fam.
$50? Well, I think that might be the most we got in a minute.
No, definitely
So,
big
but
donor
thank
there.
you, Margaret. But again, this is just a way I think of, as we say, to take care of your community. Like these workers are a part of your. Many of them might be your friends or your neighbors. So look, and it's grueling work. And I'm just saying, you should consider that. And again, to be fair, no one is saying to break your bank in order to support your neighbors that way. But what I am saying is, if you get decent service, if you're sitting down at a restaurant and you have a good time and the server wasn't an ass, tip them. Just like tip them what they should be tipped. That's
And just
all.
in
And make sure.
tipping culture so that you don't even have to worry about that. That'd be great.
Right. I mean, obviously, that should be the ultimate thing.
Yeah.
Like we should have a culture where everybody, regardless of their job, has a living wage and has dignity in their work. But we're not at that stage yet. So I'm just saying, like, tip well. Like, don't break your bank, obviously, but tip appropriately of what you get for what you're getting. Again, don't like make a $300 purchase and then give like $3.
Yeah.
Like that's just very insulting. Like I mean you could do it, but like but I think that's just wrong for you to do. And again, no service is that bad or should be ever that bad for people to get crappy tips like that. So that's just my 2 cents figuratively.
Yep.
But yeah, any last thoughts before we end the segment?
Nope. I mean, I just find it funny when they wonder
No one wants to work.
why no one wants to work. Is very clear. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the idea of, restaurants closing and then making that argument of, we have to support. I get that to a point, but at the same time, like we're in a tough economy just across the board. People are not eating out like in the same way that they're used to. Like people are kind of watching and yeah, like housing is going up, transportation's going up, like as I said earlier, even among my circles, and I work among people who are more well-to-do. They generally have money, and even they are saying, you know what, we can't just. They complain like things are just getting so much more expensive, and you're getting less quality of it. So if my well-to-do friends are saying that, then that's bad.
Yep.
So so I think we should. I hope our council members will take that approach in terms of trying to figure out, not even figure out, honor the votes, right? Honor the citizens of this district who voted to give workers dignity and ensure that they get what they deserve. So I hope they do. but we'll wait and see. And this is why talking about stories like this, even though I don't think it's problematic, is demonetized. So thank you guys again to our 2 wonderful donations that we received during the segment. If you want to give, if you haven't yet, or if you want to in the future, and especially anytime during the stream or in this clip, once we clip it out, you can scan the QR code that you see on your screen, or you can go to the link that you see at the bottom of your screen and type it in, and you can give on our Ko-fi account. You can also give on our PayPal, Substack, and Cash App. Those links will be in the description. So any amount helps, even as little as $1. But if you can give, and we know times are rough, the best way you can help support us is to like, share, and subscribe to our content. What do you guys think in this potential? What do you guys think in this in terms of this pause on suspension, essentially, of tip workers getting minimum wage? What do you think about that? But I think the bigger question is, why isn't this a larger discussion of how it's possible, even with ballot initiatives, which are meant to be, voter promoted, that the powers that be can essentially overturn that? What do you say that means in terms of our so-called democracy? So definitely be interested to hear what you guys think in the comments. Even in the stream or on the segment. And thank you guys for watching.